Hello there. I'm really glad you're here. My name is Esther de las Casas, and I'm working with Dan Vanden on the Ment Abacus project. My job title is storyteller, but in reality, I act more like a strategic advisor to Dan, helping him sort through priorities and structure ideas. You could say I'm his big picture alter ego, or something like that. It's a super challenging role, but also extremely rewarding. Today we're streaming the second episode of Dan's Sunday format. The bigger picture, reflecting on learning, education, and the cultural foundations that hold us together. Dan sends his apologies. He couldn't join us live today, so I'll be your narrator for this episode. Again. Last week, as you might remember, Dan was busy printing Ment Abacus 3D grids. They actually turned out well, but it took quite a bit of time. And today, he said he'd be looking after the sunflowers in his garden. Let's just say, Dan is always busy with something. Anyway, let's get back to today's episode of The Bigger Picture. Aim high, young astronauts. Why courage and vision still matter in learning and culture. We've grown uneasy with ambition. In school, it's not cool to care too much. At university, you hide how much you study. And later on, ambition turns quiet, something to manage, not express. You ask someone what their dream would be, in terms of what they'd love to do professionally. Typically, older people ask this of younger people. But in truth, it's a question worth asking at any age. What's the best thing you can imagine becoming? Maybe it's a scientist, a teacher, a composer, a writer. Maybe it's, metaphorically speaking, an astronaut. Now push it further. Say your only challenge was leaving the comfort zone, and the outcome depended only on effort and determination. No financial risk, no social fallout. What would you pursue? The reaction to this kind of question, especially among adults, is often quite telling. Sometimes it's a polite smirk. Sometimes it becomes a running joke, when you're not in the room. It's the posture. Why be so naive? Why ask questions that sound childish? But I think the real answer should be this. We can and should aim towards something greater. Especially as we grow older, we're well advised to keep the inner astronaut alive. Because serious, grounded dreaming isn't a juvenile phase. It's a cultural need. And I've felt the pull in both directions myself. For a while, I tried to take the sensible path, a traditional legal career in my home country. But I had always aspired to go beyond the local sphere, to do something more international. At that point, though, I wasn't prepared for it. Not formally, not practically. So I had to start again. Back to square one. Pursuing a qualification in a foreign country. It wasn't glamorous. It came with fear, doubt, and no guarantees. It felt like jumping through a burning hoop. But walking through that fear turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. Not because it was easy, but precisely because it wasn't. We live in a time where it's easy to stay passive. We scroll, we consume, we adjust. And slowly, we lower our expectations of each other and of ourselves. Often that kind of drift is hidden behind polite irony or smart-sounding realism. But let's be honest, sometimes realism is just resignation in disguise. Sometimes it's cynicism dressed up as maturity. We became disoriented. The 20th century, with all its upheavals, showed us what can happen when the void left by the death of God, as Nietzsche called it, gets filled with secular replacements. We didn't stop needing direction, but we grew suspicious of ideals and lost trust in where they might lead. And yet we still need direction, culturally and personally. The question, what's worth aiming for, has become harder to answer, even when we try. In a way, we've substituted ambition with aesthetic. Slogans instead of struggle, moods instead of meaning, wellness instead of discipline. What worries me more is how many teenagers, young adults, and adults in general, have stopped feeling that spark at all. The wider cultural context is often missing, and with it, the sense that learning matters not just for grades or credentials, but for developing the strength to move towards something worthwhile. Lowering expectations, especially in education, won't solve the problem. It might feel compassionate in the short term, but in the long run, it deprives students of something essential, the belief that they can grow into complexity. Instead of reducing the challenge, we should better equip them for it, with clearer guidance, structured support, and practical tools that help make learning manageable again. That's where approaches like the Ment abacus or other concrete methods can make a real difference. They don't make learning easy, they make it possible. That's why the astronaut code is just a metaphor, a symbol for something older and deeper. Ambition, vision, courage. These aren't traits you simply have. They're muscles, psychological and cultural, and they need training. They grow through challenge, structure, and a sense of purpose. And they wither when reduced to performance, lifestyle, or branding. The most neglected of them, I feel, is courage. Because courage means action. And action means risk. It means skin in the game. So keep aiming, quietly, deliberately. Not to impress others, not to chase approval, but because something in us falters when we don't, both on a personal and cultural level. Take the necessary risks. Aim high, young astronauts, because in our growing hubris, we seem dangerously close to forgetting how. Thanks again for checking in today, and have a great rest of your Sunday. I'll join Dan now in the garden. Let's see how the sunflowers are doing. And remember, as Dan always says, learning isn't a trend. Structure still works. Square, not hip. Visit us at mentabacus.com.